Good morning, some of you. How you guys doing today? Happy New Year. You have survived another year. Congratulations. Let's do it again. What do you say? Let's run it back. Let's do it again. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Kyle, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I just want to welcome you. So for those of you who are joining us this morning, and you've been attending, some of you for a long time, Happy New Year. It's good to be with you, and it's good to see you this morning. And maybe you're checking us out for the first time today. You're thinking it's a new year. I want to maybe try some new routines and maybe try something new out, and you chose church today. We're glad and happy that you did that, and we're honored that you would choose us to come and spend your first Sunday of the year with at 11 o'clock. And so I just want to reiterate a couple things that Bruce just mentioned to you. The first one is this. If you are new here and you are looking for ways to get further connected, or maybe you've been coming here a long time and maybe you've fallen out of the routine and you're looking for a way to maybe meet some new people, I do want to encourage you to come to Starting Point today. It's upstairs on the third floor immediately after the service. If you're like me, when you come into a room like this, it can be overwhelming at times. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of different things. You can go to our website and see there's a lot of different ministries and a lot of different camps. There's just a ton. And we want to make it as simple as possible for you to help get connected. So when I go to a place that has a lot of options, like a mall per se, you know the first thing that I go to is the directory. I look for the directory with the big red X that says, "You are here." And so if this is your first time and you're looking for a place, where's my big red X to help me find the food court? Because that's always the first place you go to when you go to the mall. Cinnabon, amen? Maybe last year, not this year because you're healthier. Wetzler's pretzels, people, come on, you know. We go to the big red X because we want to find out where we're at. Starting Point is a good place for you to find out where to start and where to go to next. We'd love to have you there and meet you there. The second thing is, I know this seems like a little bit far out, but we saw how quickly 2023 went. So next month will be like here tomorrow. But in February, we're going to be having our Covenant Community membership classes. So if you're somebody who's been around, some of you for a while, and want to commit, make some of you your home, become a member here, become a partner here, this is the best way for you to do that, is to come to this 3-week class. We did it for the first time in the fall last year, where we rotated between our 3 different campuses. So some of you church is one church with 3 campuses throughout Clark County. And each week we rotate between the different locations. So you get to meet some of the different staff, some of the different leaders, and see what Summit View is all about in a really hands-on way. So if you're interested in making Summit View your home, this would be a great way for you to do it in February. And then lastly, as Bruce mentioned, we have the class coming up, How God Sees Us. So if you're here and you're not in a life group, not a men's group or a women's group, we would encourage you to sign up and come to this class for 2 reasons. For one, we're going to spend 6 weeks looking at what the scriptures have to say about who we are. Like, we're made in his image. What does that mean? That we're forgiven. What does that mean? That we are the light to the world, that we are ambassadors, all these different statements that the scriptures would make about us. We're going to have a time of collective teaching together, and then we're going to break off into men and women's groups to discuss what that means for us and how we begin to apply that to our lives. And so if you're looking to maybe grow in your discipleship this year, your understanding of the scriptures, or simply grow in your relationship with people in the church, I want to encourage you to come to that class. It's on Tuesday nights. You could sign up with those things, summitview.net/events, and we'd love to have you. I'm really looking forward to that class. And so as we get going, let me pray for us, and we'll jump in. Father, we come to you today thankful for the opportunity to gather and the opportunity to meet with one another. God, we come to you needing to hear from you. I know the last few weeks have been chaotic for many. There's been holiday parties, there's been traveling, there's been family in town, there's been school breaks, there's been breaks of our normal rhythms and routines, and we're just trying to get back to our frenetic pace of life, it seems. So help us this morning to take a pause and hear from you. So would you give us ears to hear and be receptive to your voice? And would you give us eyes to see the truth within the scripture today? Pray for those who are mourning or hurting this morning from just a rough 2023, and we pray for those who are hopeful and expectant for 2024. Pray that as we set aside this morning for you, we'd also set aside this year for you, that your will would be done in our lives. And we pray this all in Jesus' name. All God's people said, amen. So some of you, what we often do on a Sunday morning when we gather as a church body is that our teaching team will set aside some time, and we'll set aside different scriptures and different books of the Bible to study together throughout the year. So last year we spent most of the year in Acts. But what we do in January is kind of put a pause on that, and we look at different spiritual disciplines, maybe different practices or rhythms that we can incorporate into our lives to help us grow in our faith and grow in our Christ-likeness. And so spiritual disciplines are often things that we think about or things that we do to help us grow in our faith. So in years past, we said we're going to take a week to study what it looks like to study the Scriptures so we can grow in our understanding of the Scriptures. And in years past, we've taken weeks to say, here's what prayer looks like, and here's how we pray. Here's silence and solitude. Here's different rhythms and practices that we can incorporate into our spiritual lives to help us grow closer to the image and likeness of our Savior, as well as maybe declutter our minds and declutter our hearts and declutter our lives from just the stuff that kind of encroaches upon us that keeps us from really being spiritual, right? There's all these different demands upon our lives, things that impede upon us connecting with God, and spiritual disciplines are things that we could begin to incorporate into our lives to help us grow in Christ-likeness, to hear God's voice, to see Him move, and to see Him at work within our lives. And so this January, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to take it at a slightly different angle than ones that we've typically done in the past, ones that might make us feel uncomfortable. I think all these disciplines probably to some degree make us uncomfortable, right? But ones that are not necessarily the ones you'd expect. But it shouldn't surprise us that if we want to grow in some part, aspect, or area in our life, it takes some sort of discipline or some type of training, right? Like if I want to have a healthier 2024, it's one thing to have the aspiration to do it, but it also requires an intentional plan. Like, I'm going to eat better. I'm going to avoid the gas station mini mart where the hot dogs are on the rollers all day, right? Like, I'm not going to consume those. I'm going to get up and I'm going to work out. If we think about, I want to become more financially secure in 2024, maybe I'm going to help hire a financial planner. I'm going to talk to somebody who knows how to budget, and I'm going to build a budget. And I'm going to ask somebody to hold me accountable and all those things. We think about if we want to achieve something in life, it takes a plan, right? We often think about that in very serious things like we want to get healthier or we want to get financially smarter. But what about like if you just say, you know what, in 2024, I want to become a competitive hot dog eater, right? Like, I want to defeat Joey Chestnut on the 4th of July at the hot dog eating competition challenge, right? Like, I can't just show up to Coney Island on 4th of July and beat Joey Chestnut. I have to train and begin training now to consume as many hot dogs to win the competition, right? Right? I can't just show up and throw down 80 dogs in a minute and a half. I'm going to have to start training, right? You're laughing at me, but I'm serious. You can't just show up at a competition like that. You have to train. All these areas in our life, if there's something that we want to achieve and something to aspire to, we have to put some dedication into to grow in it. However, when it comes to our spirituality, when we say we want to become more Christ-like, we treat it very haphazardly. Like it just happens when it happens. We treat our spirituality really open-handedly, randomly, or haphazardly. We don't necessarily set aside thinking through like, I want to grow in my Christ-likeness in my speech and my action and my thoughts and the way I serve, and then not put a plan to it. We just think it might happen. But these spiritual disciplines that we're going to introduce and the things that we're going to talk about are in hopes to serve us in becoming more Christ-like in our faith for this next year. Because spiritual disciplines, we give ourselves to them, these new disciplines, these new rhythms, in hopes to course correct maybe some behaviors or attitudes or old practices. So when we talk about spiritual disciplines, I don't want us to begin to think about if I do these things, I'm going to earn spiritual brownie points with God, as if he's sitting up in heaven with his accounting book and saying, this person's did this thing, this person's done this thing, so I'm going to love them more. We know as Christians and as believers that our approval has already come from God because of what Christ has done on the cross for us. That he lived a perfect life, he died the death we deserve, he went to the grave, rose again 3 days later, has ascended into heaven, and has imparted to us his perfect record with God. So the approval that we seek after from him has already been given to us. So as Christians, we don't have to participate in these spiritual disciplines to gain God's favor or God's approval because we already have it in Christ. These spiritual disciplines for us are more of ways for us to maybe hoist the sail and allow the winds to blow us closer into our Christ-likeness, to help us grow in our faith. So these disciplines aren't necessarily things that are bad and we're just simply trying to discipline ourselves for sake. We're doing it because we want to grow more like Christ, center our lives more on him, draw us closer to Jesus, get the world out of us and put more of God into us. And so I hope for 2024, our desire this year isn't simply a new year for a new you, but a new year to become more and more like our Savior Jesus. That's been one of my prayers this past week as I've been preparing for this day, and then even just knowing where we're going in this next year, that wherever we may be today, in our spirituality, our understanding of who God is, our understanding of the scriptures, our ability to exhibit the fruit of the Spirit, all the things that we talk about of signs of maturity. My hope and prayer has been that at the end of 2024, whoever's here, we'd be able to look at almost back to January 7th and say, I've seen Christ at work in you. I've seen you grow in the way that you speak to people, how you treat people, how you serve people, how you've grown in your generosity, how you've grown in your boldness and your evangelism, how you've grown in your ability to, my hope is that we wouldn't just be content with playing the church thing for the next year, but we would truly, genuinely grow in our Christ-likeness for this next year. And I think these disciplines might help facilitate some of those things. So the reason why we're talking about this is because Jesus actually has this desire and intention for his disciples to leave a lasting impact on those who they interact with. Look at what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5. Starting in verse 13, he says this: "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." So this is early on in Jesus' teaching ministry as he's calling his disciples to him. He's teaching them, saying, there's something that should be distinctly different about you because you're in relationship with me. The way in which you treat people, the way you talk to people, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you approach your life is going to be distinctively different than others that don't know Jesus. And he's saying, I hope that people would recognize your saltiness, the grittiness, the distinctness, that you would be a light in a dark place, that people would take notice of who you are. And what does he say? That people would give glory to the Father because of the way in which you've carried yourself, the way you've lived your life. And so Jesus is communicating to us that a disciple's life is very public. We often like to keep our spirituality privatized, like it's me for the 90 minutes on Sunday morning and maybe the 90 minutes once in a while I go to a group, and every now and then when I show up to serve, like that's my time. But what Jesus is actually saying, that our lives, wherever we go, we should have this distinctiveness about us that people would take notice. That citizens of the kingdom of heaven have an impact on the society around them because they are in fact different. And he invites his people to live in such a distinct way that people would see God's work in them and through them. And the hope for our spiritual discipline series is that as we begin to practice these different things, that would help make those words of Jesus become a reality for all of us. Now, before we really dig into the one for today, I do want to say one thing for many of us, because I know anytime we have a series on spiritual disciplines or some type of series that's talking about how to grow in our faith or grow in our spirituality, we can almost put this overwhelming burden or expectation on ourselves to like absolutely crush it and be like a gold medalist in it by the end of the day, right? Like we hear sermons on reading the Bible, or hear sermons on prayer or on service or on giving or fasting, and we think, I can never do that, and we just beat ourselves up and we leave defeated, right? That's not my hope, and that's not my desire for what happens for us this next month. Ruth Haley Barton, in her book Sacred Rhythms, writes this about how we should approach the different spiritual disciplines and how we should treat ourselves as we begin to engage with them. She writes this: "One of the greatest temptations of the spiritual life is to believe that if I were in another season of life, I could be more spiritual." Has anybody ever felt that way? Like if it was just a different season, I could be more spiritual. If I didn't have all this chaos, all these things going on, all the kids, all the crazy schedules. If it wasn't for this season, I could be more spiritual. But she goes on to say this. The truth is that spiritual transformation takes place as we embrace the challenges and opportunities associated with each season of our life. This involves honesty regarding the challenges. At this stage in our family's life, it's just not possible for me to get more than a half hour in solitude a day. And willingness to embrace the opportunities. Being around small children is teaching me so much about being a child in God's presence. Our expectations about ordering our life during the different seasons need to take into account what's real and can't be changed. Otherwise, we set ourselves up for frustration and failure. This is a place for learning how to be compassionate with ourselves because God certainly is. So as we look at the different spiritual disciplines this month and even the one today, I don't want us to put this overwhelming burden that we've got to figure it all out and get it all taken care of, and if not, God's going to be displeased with us. My hope is that we would just understand that there's different realities that we're all walking into, and that God is far more compassionate towards us than we realize as we seek to strive, growing in our Christ-likeness. And so today we're going to be looking at a discipline of one that you may not often think about. In fact, last fall when our teaching team went away and we picked out the topics that we would be doing, it's always fun because a lot of our staff will sit on the Excel spreadsheet as we're filling it in, trying to figure out what we're going to teach in the next year, and then they make random comments in the comment section, which doesn't help. We tell them to get out of it. They don't listen anyways. But we put this one in there that said secrecy. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? And I said, you're just going to have to wait till January. Now we're here. Now you can find out. We're looking at the spiritual discipline of secrecy. And the main idea out of it would be this. Practicing secrecy forces us to seek God's approval alone. So secrecy is a discipline of refraining from making public or popular one's good deeds or self-promotion. A discipline of secrecy is refraining from making public or popular one's good deeds or self-promotion. Now, I feel like I need to quickly say what secrecy is not, because secrecy is not keeping secrets. Now, I don't want to hear later this year a spouse having a conversation with their spouse, and then all of a sudden something comes out like, why haven't you told me this? And earlier we'll say, well, Pastor Kyle said at the beginning of the year, keeping secrets is biblical. That's not what I'm saying here, okay? You can't use that as an out. So what secrecy is not is keeping things hidden in the dark of things that need to be brought to light, right? If there's something that you're trying to hide, something that you're trying to deceive, something that you're trying to trick people on, that's not what I'm talking about here. Not at all. So don't do that. Agreed? That was simple. We should just do that every week. I'll just call you guys not going to do that, right? Not keep secrets? Okay, good. Good idea. So this idea of discipline of secrecy is not for the purpose of hiding negative things for a negative sense, but secrecy to cultivate a deeper and more personal connection with God. And so Dallas Willard in his book, The Divine Conspiracy, says this about the discipline of secrecy. The discipline of secrecy will help us break the grip of human opinion over our souls and actions. Now, I think one of the most prevalent things that we wrestle with, and it looks differently for all of us, but to some degree, all of us have a person or persons whose opinion we value so highly that our happiness, our joy, our satisfaction in life rises and falls based upon their opinion of us or their approval of us. That we have someone or some people or some group of people in our mind that if they could just like me, if they could just approve of me, my life would be made, and everything on that rises and falls. So that a discipline of secrecy helps us break us free from that approval of man or that desire of being a people pleaser. And so when we talk about secrecy, it helps serve the characteristic or the virtue of humility, right? So when we started talking about covering the topic of secrecy, people are saying, you're just talking about how to be more humble or grow in your humility. Kind of, because I think secrecy helps feed into making us a more humble people. It's not like we could just practice the discipline of humility, because that's more of a characteristic, right? Like being fit is not a discipline. It's more of a virtue or a characteristic, being healthy. So we eat well, we work out, and then that feeds into being healthy, right? So secrecy feeds into humility. Because secrecy, practicing it, will kill self-promotion and kill image management and will kill that striving for public affirmation. And if we think about it, much of our society today and much of our hearts are driven by self-promotion, self-affirmation. You know, as soon as I started preparing for this, an opening scene from one of the greatest movies ever made in the 2000s, Anchorman, came to mind. It's at the very beginning when Will Ferrell is preparing to go on air. He's just had his hair perfectly coiffed. The makeup is done, and he's looking at himself in the mirror, and he recognizes that he looks good. In fact, he says this, "I look good. I mean, really good. Hey, everyone, come and see how good I look." And it makes you laugh, it makes you giggle. But do we not quite realize that much of our lives we spend the same time posturing to others of saying, "Hey, come look at me. Come look at how good I look. Come look at how great I am, how smart I am, how strong I am, how great I am at this thing." And we know this because we have a culture that feeds this, and we simply know this because by June of 2022, more than 500 hours of videos were uploaded to YouTube every day. This equates to approximately 30,000 hours of newly uploaded content per hour. 720,000 hours of new content per day. If you were to divide that up, you'll see that's about 82 years. So that means there's 82 years of content to YouTube every single day. And most of it is people simply talking about themselves, showing themselves off. TikTok has over 30 million videos posted a day, all people striving for public affirmation, public recognition. And so it's one thing to say, well, I don't have a YouTube channel, and if you think, thanks be to God for that, if you do, we'll talk later. But we also do this at our work. We posture ourselves for the right raise or for the promotion or for the right opportunities. Maybe depending on the family that we grew up in, we had the talented older sibling that always shadowed us, and we had to figure out ways to get the attention on me. Or maybe you were the older sibling and you had that charismatic younger sibling that got all the attention, and you're curiously asking yourself, how do I stand out? And that's never left you, even though you're now a grown adult. And so this discipline of secrecy deals with the desire for others to think of us as well and take notice of us. And so if you've ever wrestled with that, if you've ever had a hard time dealing with that, I think this discipline is one that might be very well for you to begin to practice and put into place. It actually might be one of the more difficult ones that we'll study this month. Willard goes on to say in the spirit of the disciplines this: "In the discipline of secrecy, we abstain from causing our good deeds and qualities to be known. We may even take steps to prevent them from being known if it doesn't involve deceit. To help us lose or tame the hunger for fame, justification, or just the mere attention of others, we will often need the help of grace. But as we practice this discipline, we learn to love, to be unknown, and even accept misunderstanding without the loss of our peace, joy, or purpose. In the practice of secrecy, we experience a continuing relationship with God independent of the opinions of others." And so the goal for this spiritual discipline of secrecy is that we don't necessarily have to gain fame. We don't have to gain our justification. We don't have to gain the attention of others, because as Christians, we can be so confident and comfortable in knowing that we already have the one's approval that we ultimately need in God's, and he's freely given it to us because of what Christ has accomplished. So we don't have to clamor. We don't have to work at trying to get other people's attention. And so Jesus actually teaches this out a little bit of saying how to perform for an audience of one. And he says this in Matthew 6. "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Now, on first blush, it could seem like Jesus absolutely just contradicted himself, right? Because in Matthew chapter 5, just the page before, he says, hey, be salty, be the light, let others take notice so they give glory to your Father, right? He's saying, be these things. But then all of a sudden, you flip the page on to chapter 6, and now he's saying, hey, don't do things so people pay attention to you. Jesus, what are you telling me? Did you forget what you just said, Jesus? What I believe he's getting at here, it's not a conflict of interest. He's actually saying there's a difference in who's being glorified. The reason of why you're striving to do things. If you're doing things to glorify yourself, draw attention to yourself, it's wrong. If it's putting on display God, that's ultimately what God has intended. So the desire for the Christian, for somebody who's growing in their faith, somebody who's growing in their relationship with God, the desire for them is to perform for the audience of one, for God. And it's not a performance to show off, but it's an act of worship to give yourself to him, solely for him, not for the sake of the others around you. We don't do different good deeds or spiritual acts to draw attention to ourselves, but because we're so caught up with how good our God is, we can't help but respond to him in such a way. So our ultimate desire is for God to be recognized and seen. So we don't give, we don't pray, we don't worship to impress and show off our spirituality. We do those things because we love God. We're in it for him. F.B. Meyer says this about this verse. That word take heed or beware is very searching. We are all liable to the temptation to put more and better goods in the window than we have anywhere else in the shop, and to show fairer samples than we can supply in bulk. Now think of it this way. Go back to your courtship days. I just dated myself. I didn't even court anybody back in the day. Okay. Imagine when you're dating, right? You had that one outfit. Fellas, you had that one outfit. The ladies had multiple outfits. But the guy's like, if I'm going out on a date with this lady, I'm going to wear that one outfit because I'm going to look good because that's the only good outfit I had because my mom bought it for me when I went to my aunt's wedding, right? Like that's the one outfit that you had that looked good. But that's the only one you had. So you had all the nice ones up in the storefront window, but the supply in the back didn't help up the back. Or think about when you go on a job interview, you're like, I'm going to make sure that my shirt's ironed. I'm going to make sure it's tucked in. I'm going to make sure I don't use slang. I'm going to make sure I don't cuss in front of them. I'm going to make sure that I brush my teeth that day. Like you think about, I'm going to put my best foot forward, but then when they hire you, they quickly realize hey, what happened to that guy, right? What Myers talked about in this quote is that there's this thing inside of all of us to project and portray something on the storefront window or the sample of what's really great, but we actually don't have much more to back that up. And that's when we begin to posture, and that's when we begin to work really hard to maintain whatever image that we set up before that is actually really lacking in the stock rooms and not really there. We begin to perform and act on behalf for others rather than pursuing and worshiping God. So Jesus gives 3 examples of not doing righteous acts before others. And so when we look at these examples that he gives, he's not saying don't do these things, but do them in the right way. And he uses 3 examples, and he intends for them to be implied across all areas of our lives. And he probably chose these 3 actions that we're going to look at for the sake of that they were really important for the Jewish context and the Jewish people at the time in which he was. And so he presses on the idea of doing the right things for the right reasons, not the right things with the wrong motives. And so the first example he gives is in giving. Matthew 6, 2-4. He says, thus when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, it would be kind of silly to think about if this actually really happened, and it's fitting that we had a trumpet on stage today. I actually asked Tim to consider when he gave and put his offering and think that he would blow his trumpet, make a real standout saying hey, everybody come and look how great I am. I'm giving today. I didn't really ask him to do that because that would be silly, right? And so we might not necessarily do this in our time of worshiping and when we do our offering that people are saying, hey, everybody, look at me, I'm giving today. It's got a lot of commas and a lot of zeros. Like we don't really do that. But there are different ways in which we think that if we are maybe giving of something or offering of something towards God, that people should take notice. And we get frustrated when they don't. But when they do, we feel really good about ourselves, like, they saw. And what Jesus is saying is like, they've already received a reward from that. He says these individuals are like hypocrites. They're play actors performing for the audience. They weren't wanting to be generous and give towards God because they loved him and his mission and his kingdom. They wanted to do this to stand out and make a name for themselves. He says that the receipt has already been given to them. It's been paid in full. There's no reward to come to them. You know, we may have even felt a little bit of this over the Christmas holiday, right? There are times in which we give a gift to somebody because we genuinely love them and we just want to give it to them and we can't wait for them to open it because the joy that it's going to bring them, and we love them and we want them to have that gift, right? But have you ever given a gift to somebody because you were hoping to get something in return? You know, spouses, we often do this for or maybe I just do it and I'm far more sinful than you. But like sometimes like we give gifts or we do something for somebody that we love and we think we're going to get something in return, and when they don't, we get frustrated. And that's what Jesus begins to press upon. He's like, these individuals who are performing for the audience, not really performing for God, not wanting to honor and worship him, they've already got what they've wanted when they've made their offering. That there's these two-faced people who act differently in public than they do in private. And he goes so far to even tease out something else even further, saying that they're looking for the notoriety and recognition of others, but also they want to do it for themselves, that if they don't get the self-congratulatory elsewhere, they'll do it for themselves. Because that's what Jesus is talking about here, saying don't let your left hand from your right hand is doing. Because there'll be times like, okay, maybe nobody noticed. I gave with my right hand today. Nobody noticed and took notice, but I did, and boy, that was really good. That desire for affirmation, that desire for notoriety. We seek it from others, and if we can't get it from others, we'll give it to ourselves. So Jesus says we have this tendency to maybe do that with our giving. He uses it in verse 5 through 15. He talks about it in our prayer. He says this, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. And so Jesus teases out these two different ways people approach prayer for the wrong reasons. One, he says the religious who do it for their admiration of others, that they want others to recognize and see them for their ability to pray and laud a praise upon them. And he says they've already gotten what they wanted. Their words of prayer weren't for me. Their words of prayer were for those around them, for themselves. But then he also teases out the pagan or the Gentile, the person who's far from God, who just uses lots of words because they're thinking maybe if I say the right words or the right recantations or the right phrasing, that God will give me ultimately what I want. I can get God's attention that way. And so we shouldn't pray thinking that one's prayers formulas earn God's favor, but as an expression of trust to a God who already knows what we need. Did you see what he says that in 8? He knows what you need before you ask him. And so prayer is an experience for the believer to have with their God, not to show off for those around them. So prayer is not about how long it is or how wordy it is, nor how eloquent it is. It's about who you're praying to. And this is one that we could probably get better at just revealing and confessing before you guys in some different ways. This is one that I totally struggle with week in and week out. And if you were to ask our worship leader, and I even teased out Bruce Dillon last service, that when we come to church on Sunday and you guys are like, all right, you guys are going to pray for this morning, there is a certain aspect where like my mind should be focused solely on God, but I'm too busy consumed about, man, I hope these people like my prayer and think that I'm spiritual enough to pray for them. Or that, man, he can pray really well, so he can be my pastor. Or that, like, what's that guy doing with a microphone? He can't even talk. Like, those are the things that go in my mind. Like, my time of prayer isn't necessarily before God is saying, God, would you please move in such a way that your spirit rattles us? Like, my mind, I wish more times than not my mind was totally there versus like, man, I hope this sounds good. Was that a complete sentence? Do they think I'm an idiot? Yes, God, I know, but do you think I'm an idiot? Like my prayer isn't towards him, it's thinking about here. Like I said, we already know Bruce does it. He confessed that last service. It was my turn to confess it this service. See, there's this temptation inside of all of us. And I know it's not just me, because I know in your life groups, you're probably thinking about, okay, maybe I shouldn't pray because I don't have the right words to say, and I don't want people to think I'm not as spiritual. Again, you're thinking about the wrong reason to pray. He says in those very verses, inviting you, your Father knows what you need before you ask him. You're just communicating with him, communing with him, because your prayer is for him. You already have his approval. And notice what we could almost do in this passage as well. We can almost err in the side of saying, well, then we shouldn't pray in public. But that's not what Jesus is doing here at all. He's not forbidding public or communal prayer, because if you remember last year as we studied the book of Acts, we saw the church gathered praying together all the time, and we saw God do miraculous things. And in fact, just as a teaser, that's what we're going to do next week. So the next week's discipline that we're going to look at is communal prayer or corporate prayer. So you know what that means? I'm going to talk a whole lot less, and we're going to pray a whole lot more together. And so for those of you who are extroverts and those who are really wordy, maybe consider reading these verses before you come in next week. For those of you who are introverts and will hate next week, I'm sorry in advance. And if you try and use the weather as an out not to come next week, I'll just wait to do it another week and you'll catch you another time, all right? You see, the desire of prayer is to have an experience in communion with God. And the content of the prayer is to bring God glory, not to express our own thoughts, our own actions, and our own things. Again, just notice Jesus' loving encouragement. Your Father knows what you need before you ask him. How much more freer does that mean that you can commune with him, not having to impress others around you? And then Jesus goes on in verses 16 through 18, talking about fasting. He says, when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. So the discipline of fasting is one in which we abstain from food from a period of time so we can commit that time towards prayer, towards service, towards action and communion with God. So we're forgoing something within our life and saying, I'm going to have less of this so I can have more of God. And in the time that Jesus was teaching, he was saying that there's these Pharisees that would fast twice a week, and then they would make a big hullabaloo about it. They'd cover themselves in ash and dirt and dust and make a scene about themselves as saying, look how holy I am and how righteous I am. I'm fasting again, all these blah, 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 blah. He's saying, don't be like them. When you fast, wash your face. And if you don't fast, you should still wash your face. That's a free hygiene lesson for 2024. But he's saying, when you fast, when you engage in these spiritual practices, go about your life like you normally would. Go about not trying to draw attention to yourself, the approval from others, the adoration of others. Just simply go about and doing what you're doing, and your Father who's in heaven sees. And so for us, we might not necessarily think about giving or prayers or our fasting as ways in which we draw attention or affirmation and approval from others, but maybe we do it in other ways, whether it's they're really going to know I mean this song because I'm going to be very expressive in worship, because I'm going to raise my hands and I hope others notice it. Or I'm going to be really emotive and I'm going to draw attention to how much I'm loving this song because I want people to know how spiritual I am. I think other ways that we do it, and maybe, and this might be even more so for in the Pacific Northwest, or maybe even just for us and our church buddies, I think there's this tendency to have excessive volunteerism. If the doors are open, I'm going to be there. If there's an opportunity, I'm going to fill it. So I'm not not trying to discourage you from serving and engaging yourself in the church body, but there is a sense where I think there is times where we involve ourselves in so many things because we want people to see and take notice of just how serious we are about our spirituality. We almost have this martyrdom complex that if I'm not there, it can't go on without me. And I think Jesus would say, for your service, your reward's already been given. And so the discipline of secrecy helps us put into place things of proper worship and the glory due. A reason why practicing this discipline is important is because you and I, as individuals, we were built to experience and desire glory. Because we are made in God's image, we are built innately to desire glorious and beautiful things. We are built to long for those types of things because we're made in God's image. But the problem is that we quickly want to take that glory, that adoration, that affection for ourselves. Sin makes us want it for ourselves. And so the solution for that would be thinking about what Christ has done for us. Look at what Paul writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 14 through 15. He says, "For the love of Christ controls us," meaning that we are motivated by the love of Christ, that we don't have to operate in such a way to gain his love, to gain his approval, to gain his affection. He's already given it to us. And so we are motivated by those things, meaning that we don't need it from anyone else or anywhere else. The love of God controls us because we have concluded this. How did we get that love from God? He's died for all. Therefore, all have died. He died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who, for their life's sake, died and was raised. Do you notice that? Those who might live no longer live for themselves. One of the best ways to begin the discipline of secrecy, to live out of the approval that you already have for God, is knowing that you live for him. You don't live for yourself. You don't have to gain approval, fame, or justification because in Christ you already have those things. Now, this week, as I was preparing, I was really wrestling with what does it look like to conclude and wind down a service and a gathering on the discipline of secrecy, and I was wrestling with it all week. And even was joking around with some of the staff members, like, I still don't know how this is going to end. I might just walk off stage one day and that's it. But last night, as I was going for a walk, because, I was saying my 2024, be healthier, fitter, I now received my reward because I told you I worked out. It's not being fitter, just wanting you to know I have those aspirations, right? I went for this walk last night, praying for our church, praying for our gathering, praying for our time together, and Psalm 115 came to mind. And the psalm starts off with saying, "Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory." And I was thinking about what would that look like for us as a people of Summit View? What kind of impact would that have on our church body? What kind of impact would that have on our community and our county at large if the people of Summit View, and whatever we did in our acts of service and our attending on worship and our participation in whatever it is, we said, not to us, but to God, your name be the glory? How would that begin to radically change our lives and the world around us? How would that help us actually live out what Jesus is inviting us to be salty and to be the light, right? Like when we send kids away to camp in just a couple of weeks and we see kids finding out their salvation in Jesus Christ and beginning to use their spiritual gifts to serve the body at large, we would say, not to us, O Lord, but to your name be the glory. That in just 10 or 11 weeks from now when we have Easter, surprise, it's coming already. When people come and bring their family and their family members and they hear about the resurrection for the first time and people respond in faith and people become new creations in Christ, we want to say, not to some of you, no, not to us, O Lord, but to your name be the glory. When we do other events that reaching out and caring for our community, whether it's more food boxes or fall fests, when we serve those in need of our community, when we open up our doors for our life groups and people far from Christ come in and grow in their understanding of the scriptures and give their lives to Christ, we would say, not to us, O Lord, but to your name be the glory. That would be so quickly off our lips and off of our minds that we would say, God, this is not because of us, this is not by us, this is because of you and your glory. We're just simply living out of the things that you've placed in front of us. And that's what I begin to pray for us. That we would be so quick to say, not to us, Lord, but to your name be the glory. Let us pray. Father, we come to you this morning recognizing that we often have conflicted motives in what we do and why we do them. It's such a silly game we play with ourselves and with you, thinking about posturing an image about ourselves for others and even thinking that we can impress you, God. So would you keep us from being a people that Jesus warns us about in Matthew chapter 6? But God, ultimately we give you thank you for the fact that when we find ourselves as hypocrites, which we often are, you still meet us with grace and mercy. When we're people who worship for show, give for show, serve for show, your Spirit quickly convicts us and calls us to repent. Would you help us to be a people that quickly reply when we feel that conviction to say, not to us, O Lord, but to your name be the glory. So help us to live as people freed from the striving of approval for others, knowing that all the approval that we need comes from you, Lord. So not to us, O Lord, but to your name be the glory.